Hey, friends, it's Locked On Twins. Our friend Dave Brown, answer Dave Brown, is a little under the weather this evening, but we have a fun and jam-packed episode for you with Howard Sinker doing his Hall of Fame ballot. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can unfollow me on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE. Conspicuous by his absence is Dave Brown, but hopefully he feels better. We'll get him back on Tuesday. Still kind of hard to believe it's Monday. The whole holiday week has me just thrown off. But thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. Again, we want to encourage you to be active in the comments. We've had some pretty good comments. Our friend FTL Nova Kid with the thumbs up. And we had a few people in there saying we weren't allowed to take Jose Ramirez from the Guardians. But it was a fun episode. We talked about the 5 players we would most like to steal from the rest of the division and take for the Twins. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today's guest is a person, a friend that I probably go about 15 years back with, I would say. It's Mr. Howard Sinker of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Howard, how are we doing this evening?
We're doing good, Brandon. Good to be visiting with you.
Very, very good, and good to catch up. It's been a while. I don't know that I've seen you anywhere in coming up on 4 years. I mean, I haven't been downtown much with COVID. Haven't been much in the way of Twins games, so we'll have to remedy that at some point here.
I keep a low profile too. You know, to find me at Target Field, you have to come check me out in the stands. It's at section 218, and I don't have any real business in the press box anymore, so I leave that to the people who are really working there.
That's fair. And so if we have listeners, maybe younger listeners who don't know, you were a very accomplished longtime writer covering the Twins. What year were you BBWAA chairman? I want to say it was like I don't want to speak your thunder.
I think it was 1984.
1984.
Yeah. And as you know, as people, that's a job that rotates among writers from various news organizations and platforms. And I still have the plaque from that year. When I want to check out what my younger self looked like.
It's fun to look back at things like that. I do keep some mementos too. I had a game where I was a stringer. The Boston Herald just called me up out of the blue, and I ended up covering Kevin Youkilis getting traded from the Red Sox to the White Sox because the White Sox were in town to play the Twins. I obviously in the Twin Cities, so I got to be there and kind of chronicle like him showing up with his Red Sox bag and all that fun stuff. Also, too, he was traded in the middle of the game, and so he hit a triple, slid into third, walked off the field, and was traded. But long story even longer, I kept the newspaper clipping from the physical copy of that day's Boston Herald, and I bet you not too many writers that have come out recently have that sort of memento, I don't think.
I was going to ask you, what's a newspaper again? Yeah, can you refresh my memory about that, please?
No, I probably can't, but I'll do my best. Do you find yourself downtown at the office much or anything like that, or are you kind of working? Are you kind of directing traffic from a distance?
I'm working mostly from home. I do the hands-on work at StarTribune.com, the sports part of the website, and it's easier, and I think it's more effective. It's one of the few jobs I think that you could really do from home, do remotely. With my media setup here, I do miss. I mean, I do miss working in the office with my colleagues. I'll be going into tomorrow, in fact, to do some work. Um, but just I start work, before 6 a.m. And if I were to be in the office at 6 a.m., I wouldn't be seeing anybody for about 3 or 4 hours. So
Right.
that's half the workday.
Yeah, the news cycle is tricky because I, for instance, write notes for networks, but I can only write when games are finished. I can't collect stats when there's games going on. So it is kind of fun to hear, the secondary backside stories of, I think everybody has kind of an idea of what they think a person who works in journalism does. And I think it's always kind of funny that it's quite a bit different. But when did you come off the road, come off the beat, and is there any specific part of it that you miss?
Well, I stopped covering the team in August of 1987. So the year the Twins won their first World Series.
Yep.
In a way, it was a very good thing because I was able to do all of the social things that are involved in when a World Series is in town
Nice.
without having to worry about the writing. And the other part of it that was, I think this is a singular, when you say, okay, what's the thing you've done that maybe nobody else has ever done? I was one of the 3 official scorers during the 1987 World Series. And there's one from each of the participating cities. And the third one is from the Baseball Writers Association of America. The game 1 of the World Series was my first game ever as an official scorer.
Wow.
So I was, that's even better than Dave Winfield never having played in the minor leagues. I made my scoring debut as part of a gang of 3 at game 1 of the World Series.
Little Alex,
which I think freaked out the other 2 guys too.
Yeah. Well, he debut in the postseason like Alex Kirilloff. Not many come along like that. No, that sounds terrifying to me. Just because, I guess if Stu Thornley can handle it. No, I'm kidding. I love Stu, and I shouldn't tease. But no, that sounds terrifying to me because, Twins PR isn't that terrifying. I don't want to have to make a call where I get someone in my ear. But
the worst you can do is be wrong. And nobody's perfect. And I had people, you had people ask why you made a call. There were times when I was asked to look at video where I changed some calls, and it gave me an excuse to talk to a lot of baseball people after the fact. And I had some really good conversations with people who knew a whole lot and know a whole lot about the game that really helped make me pretty functional in that job.
Well, and we talk about someone who knows a whole lot. Stu definitely qualifies, so I might have to have him on sometime. He could tell stories for days.
Yeah, Stu is good at it.
He climbed the foul pole,
Yeah, I when I watch a game, I'll play second guess the scorer, and I'm usually in the same place Stu is at when he makes his calls.
Well, good. That actually is that's probably something to hang your hat on. Let's do this. Let's take a quick second, chat to our friends about FanDuel a little bit, and then when we come back, we're gonna go into the nitty gritty of your ballot. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, here we go. One quick second. We'll talk about FanDuel, and we'll be right back. All right, so as weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, overs, unders, and much, much more. And again, it's $150 in bonus bets if your team wins, or if you do misery mitigation like I do, you just bet against your own team. Either you win the game or you win the dough. Either way, it works. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right, Howard, we're back in for the second segment. I call it the bullpen. We don't usually talk about the bullpen, but we will touch on at least one reliever here. Dave, the co-host who's usually on here, again, we mentioned earlier he's feeling a little under the weather. This is his first year voting for the Hall of Fame, and he voted for 10. Bobby Abreu, Adrian Beltre, Carlos Beltran, Todd Helton, Joe Mauer, A-Rod, Gary Sheffield, Chase Utley, Billy Wagner, David Wright. So if we had Dave on, I thought it was going to be kind of funny to see you guys pick each other's brains about maybe some of your lack of overlap. But Dave is a first-year voter. I suspect that's not the case for you.
No, I've been voting since 2019. That was
Nice.
That was my first year. And in fact, I had to look it up because I couldn't remember whether it was like 4 or 5, 6 years. It's an honor and it's fun, and I get to geek out with numbers for a few days to try to figure out what I'm going to do from year to year. So and I like to think that. I have a pretty good basis for the choices I make, both who I vote for and who I don't vote for.
How long had you had your eye on voting for the Hall of Fame? Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not even in the BBWAA. Would I like to be someday? Yes. Would I wait the 10 years? Yes, obviously. But to say I've had my eye on it, probably from the day I started writing about baseball, was like that would be the dream. Was that something you really yearned for, sought after, or was it more something else?
I never really thought about it, Brandon, to be honest with you. I was a member of the BBWAA when I was covering the Twins, and for a couple of years afterward. And then there was sort of a tightening of membership. I mean, I wasn't working in sports at the time, and it didn't really make any sense I was happy to be a member, but if they were going to say, hey, you don't really belong in this club, I didn't have much of a case. So I was, I was taken off the Twin Cities BBWAA roster about 3 years before I would have been eligible. And then when I was an assistant sports editor at the Star Tribune, and then became the web sports editor, I became a member again, and it just sort of snuck up on me. All of a sudden, they said, "Hey, you've been a member for 10 years. You get to vote." And it's been fun. I have a group of people, some data nerds, some baseball players, former baseball players at Macalester College, where I teach part-time, who I've relied on in the past. There are one of my former journalism students is also a former major league scout, and I talked to him. And then there are just some people in town who I really respect their judgments, and I'll check in with them, from year to year. So I try not to make the decisions in a vacuum. I'll say, hey, I'm thinking about here's who I'm probably going to vote for. What am I missing? Who am I missing? And can you talk me out of any of these?
Well, what's your opinion? And I'm not saying you got to slam them or absolutely, say they're great. What do you think of the Hall of Fame ballot tracker? Because the one thing I question is, and obviously you put it out there so that it could be on the tracker. Yeah. It's like in an election, though, we don't know the results during the day. Whereas in this, like, the voting is still open technically until, what was it? It would have to be postmarked technically Saturday, I think, is the last day. It's a little strange that the electorate can see things in real time or real-ish time. Do you think the ballot or the tracker is universally good, universally bad, somewhere in between, or where do you stand on it?
I can't imagine that baseball writers, who as a group are pretty opinionated, are going to be swayed by what they see on the tracker.
You'd hope not.
I think it's fine. I think it's it's about it's not about us, it's about fans. And clearly, by the response that Ryan, and the others who work on that get, I think it's a good thing. I feel like if I can't back up my ballot, I shouldn't be voting. And I've had people really like my ballots. I've had people, get a little annoyed with me for people who I didn't vote for. I was a non-voter for Kurt Schilling, and I have no apologies for that.
Yep.
And every year people would say, hey, what about? And that's fine. Just because I have an opinion doesn't make it right, even though I'd like to think, I do know what I'm talking about. There are other valid points of view on most things.
So, spoiler alert, you have 9 players selected. In your own mind's eye, are you a small hall, big hall, somewhere in between kind of guy?
I'm get the deserving candidates out there. In the 6 years that I voted. There were 10 years. There were 2 years when I voted for 10.
Okay.
And I think my smallest group was 7. I just really look at who's deserving. And what was interesting, Brandon, about this year's ballot is there were 9 choices that I could make with it really confidently, and there were about 5 people on the ballot, about 5 players who I would consider as a 10th vote, but there was no way I could figure out how to choose one over the other, and all of them are going to get more chances over the coming years. So I didn't feel bad about not, the 10th vote would have been almost like, let's put, let's put Bobby Abreu and a few other names in a hat and pick one.
Yeah.
And I was not comfortable with saying, I picked this person, but I could have just as easily picked that person.
So let's run down a list here of the people I think were probably your just missed.
Sure.
Bobby Abreu, I suspect, was one.
I've spent a lot of time, and I've talked to some people in Philly about Abreu, and it's interesting that you get a real mixed reaction on him.
Surprised.
But here's what's up with that, and it's like, we can talk about Joe Mauer later, but sometimes when you see a player play all the time, you see the flaws as well as the excellence.
True. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I'm sure Billy Wagner had some bad outings. I just don't remember any of them.
Yeah, no, that's true, and especially when he played and the prevalence of games being visible from your house or mine, watching Vin Scully late night on a weeknight, just in Minnesota. That wasn't available back in those days, or at least at the start of his career. Was Andy Pettitte on the fringe for you?
Yeah, he is. He's become on the fringe for me. I'm really in the process now of reevaluating how I look at starting pitchers, because some of the traditional milestones just don't exist anymore. You're not going to be looking at being a 300 game winner. You're going to have to come up with we're going to have to come up with new ways to judge, not only judging a statistic like victories, but we have to come up with a new way of interpreting some of the advanced metrics too, because the numbers mean different things, I think, starting in the last decade than they might have meant before that.
Yeah, the game constantly changes, and you have to be aware of it. Chase Utley, I suspect, was on the cusp for you.
Yeah, he's pretty close. Not as close, I think, to me as Abreu, which I know sets some people off, but I'm not as big a fan of him as other people, but I'm going to look at him more closely in the future. I can become a fan.
Got it. How about David Wright?
I'm not a big David Wright guy. I think a lot of the David Wright excitement is because he played for the Mets.
That's probably fair. And then what about Jimmy Rollins? Were you in any interest in him?
That's not he might be the best of the Hall of very good.
Yep.
And again, I'm going to look at that more closely, but it just wasn't going to happen this year. So
Right.
I didn't spend, say, the amount of time reading about him or researching him than I would have, say, like with Maurer this year, or looking at someone like Andrew Jones, who I think is should be a Hall of Famer and has not gotten his due yet.
Anybody else? Was Mark Burley in that mix for you, or was he more another Hall?
I want to look at Burley closely. Yeah, he's and again, this goes back to reevaluating starting pitchers,
Right.
and I think Burley to me is the most fascinating case of that group, and maybe the hardest call, which to me makes it more fun.
In your opinion, as years progress and you're voting, have you felt like the ballot has gotten more or less crowded?
It's a year-to-year thing.
Okay. So it's not a trend thing so much.
Yeah, I don't see things trending one way or another, other than I think more people seem to be making a commitment to vote for the maximum. And I haven't looked at the numbers to back that up, but I think there are more people who are going out of their way to vote for 10. And those are countered by some of the votes that I just don't understand. The people who vote for 1 or 2 and seem to have strong kind of secondary preferences at the expense of people who I think are no-brainers.
Well, one didn't have Beltray on it and had 2 other guys. That to me,
Yeah.
It didn't make a lot of sense. How do you feel about the 0 votes as opposed to not turning in a ballot?
If I don't think anybody's worthy, I'm not going to vote. I mean, I would never be, that would never be the case for me, I don't think.
Yep.
But if someone isn't going to vote for anybody, just sit it out.
Don't turn in a blank ballot is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't think that makes it harder for everyone else. And I just think it feels a little bit passive aggressive. It's like voting in a general election and writing in your dog if you don't like either candidate.
Well, my dog's named after Rocco Baldelli, so I don't know. I might vote for him then.
Yeah.
We'll rip off the Band-Aid. Joe Mauer is on your ballot. He's front and center on the ballot itself in terms of he's square in the middle. And as of this moment, 82.2%. He's on 83 ballots. Beltray has more. Billy Wagner is not far behind him with 80 ballots. Todd Helton, 83. So Helton and Mauer tied. You told me you confided in me, and I'm blowing your spot up now, that Joe Mauer was more of a struggle for you than maybe people thought.
Yeah, here's the big issue with Mauer. And I'll walk you through this and how I arrived at the decision. And feel free to cut me off or interrupt me with a question.
Absolutely not.
There's, it's a 15-year career.
Yep.
10 years as a catcher. 2 of those years cut short by injuries, and 5 years at first base, where his offensive numbers basically made him Doug Mankiewicz. Good, not great, very good fielder. So I had to decide. I was going to vote for him for the Hall of Fame. The question was, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? And for me, there's a distinction between the absolute best of the best and the other guys. So I was looking at Mauer, and I had to decide, okay, do those 5 years as a catcher at first base keep him from being a first ballot Hall of Famer? And to get right to what really influenced my decision, in addition to conversations I had, and I heard people, again, on both sides, there's a stretch from 2006 to 2010, 5 years as a catcher that are absolutely phenomenal. And no matter what standard you're holding him to, from 2006 to 2010, He had a 334 batting average, a 416 slugging percentage. His OPS plus was 143. He won 3 batting titles. He won 3 Silver Sluggers. He won an MVP. He was a top 10 for the MVP in 3 other years, and he won 3 Gold Gloves.
Yeah,
that's just a sick, crazy, wonderful stretch. And my comparison, here's the comparison I'm going to make. Let's say we assume that Johnny Bench is the best catcher of all time. He had a 6-year stretch from 1970 to 1975 in which he had just phenomenal offensive numbers that are comparable to Mauer's. And I'm going to use slugging percentage here. Bench's slugging percentage was .502, and he hit 145 home runs. He hit 198 home runs in that stretch.
Unbelievable.
That's 130 more home runs than Mauer hit in his 5-year stretch. And remember, Bench is a 6 years, but it's still a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
But the number that is the offensive number that's really incredible to me in that time is Joe Mauer's slugging percentage, because of his extra base hits and because his batting average was 64 points higher than Bench's, his slugging percentage was only 11 percentage points lower than Johnny Bench's.
Incredible.
That's so when you look at that, it's really, really hard to say that Joe Mauer is not a catcher by which every other catcher in Major League history should be defined by. And then when you spin it into the future, the player I was looking at was Buster Posey.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be really hard-pressed not to vote for Buster Posey as a first ballot Hall of Famer. I
Agreed.
think he's, and if you're going to vote for Posey and you're going to compare Mauer to one of the greats of all time, it became impossible for me to say, no, he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's right there. Well, what I come back to is a few things. If from that era, Joe Mauer as a catcher isn't a Hall of Famer, then you're hard pressed to find anybody else as a catcher. You know, he went neck and neck with like Russell Martin and Brian McCann for like best catcher in baseball. Even those guys didn't match up to him over a career. And a part of it too, for me, you look at the career WAR leaders at positions, and again, I'm not trying to say WAR is the be all end all, but the bar for a catcher is much lower. I think Bench is in the 80s for Fangraphs WAR or something, 76-7, something like that. Whereas, you know, like a guy like David Wright, whose career was also shortened by injuries, like the performance gap between Wright and the best of the best third baseman is bigger than it is from Joe Mauer to the best of the best catchers. Now, would I vote for Wright? I don't know for sure. Unlimited ballot, absolutely, because I'm a big Hall guy. But it comes down to, if you didn't think Joe Mauer was a Hall of Famer, you are probably going to go many years without electing a catcher until Buster Posey is eligible. I guess it's not many years, but you will have gone a lot of years without seeing a Hall of Fame catcher. So to me, I'm voting yes for both, no problem at all.
Yeah, and who does who do the good young catchers get compared to? They get compared to Buster Posey. They get compared to Joe Mauer.
Yep.
And nobody's. I don't think there's ever going to be another catcher like Pudge Rodriguez who caught for 20 years and was he didn't have a huge drop off, mostly because he was never really known as a power hitter,
right.
But he was a defensive wizard, and yet still, Mauer's comparable, and a better offensive player and comparable defensively.
Yeah, he was a Molina brother defensively, but then offensively he was, I don't know, Mickey Tettleton, or I don't know, someone, a good, very good offensive catcher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's fine for different voters to have different standards. I mean, if we all had similar standards, what fun would the voting be?
Exactly. Well, so let's roll over your ballot here and wrap it up here in a couple minutes. But you voted for Carlos Beltran, Adrian Beltre, Todd Helton in the first column, Andrew Jones, Joe Mauer, Manny Ramirez in the second, and A-Rod, Gary Sheffield, and Billy Wagner in the third. That's some good ballot symmetry there. I like it.
I kind of like, pick 3 from column A, pick 3 from column B, but that had nothing to do with it in reality, obviously.
Well, when Dave sent me his list, he had Joe Mauer on there on number 7, and I said, "Okay, seriously, that must have been intentional." He said, "No, he swore it wasn't." So I'll take both of you at your word in this situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. But no, I feel like I do enough work on my ballot that when I send it in, I feel really good about it, and I like being in a position where I don't have to knock people off the ballot. I don't want to have. I don't want to be in a situation where new people come along and I have to, give up on somebody who I'm voting for, because I like to think I have really good reasons for voting for everyone. It's like, if you want to, it's like being Ric Flair. If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man, and the officials are going to help you. Are going to do everything they can to make sure Ric Flair keeps the title. So
whether you like it or you don't like it, it's the best thing going today.
Yeah,
I love Ric Flair quotes. I could do those all day. Let's close with this. I'm not trying to get you to eat your own or anything, but how do you feel, generally speaking, the Hall of Fame BBWA electorate does at what they're trying to do?
Oh, I think we do pretty well. There's when you have a group of 400 or so voters, there are going to be some votes that are embarrassing. I mean, that's part of the package. But if we take 400 people off the platform, formerly known as Twitter, and say, okay, y'all are the Hall of Fame voters this year, they're going to be all over the place in their opinions too. So, covering baseball or being involved in baseball closely for 10 years, you see a whole lot on which to make judgments. And then the challenge is not to be clouded one way or another, the players who you see all the time. Don't vote for Torrey Hunter just because you saw him play and you liked him and he's a really good guy. I all those things apply to Torrey Hunter, but he's not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think that the writers did a real disservice 2 years ago when Joe Nathan fell 1 vote short of getting 5% to stay on the ballot. Because I think the more people would have talked about Joe Nathan, the better he would have had he would become like Billy Wagner is now, somebody who's earned his way close to being a Hall of Famer and might, I hope, make it this year.
Well, listen, I lied. One interesting thing, because you explained to me how your voting came to be, so that gap sort of more or less guarantees that you're not going to vote for too many players you saw. Gary Sheffield, I think, debuted in '87, but he was with the Brewers and shortstop and not playing that much. Do you think that's an interesting dynamic, that a lot of the players you saw and will vote on, you were a fan as opposed to in the press box? Or
yeah, but I'm still a highly paid media professional, so I still, I can't use the word I was going to use, but I watched a boatload of baseball just because I really like it.
Yeah.
And I'm a data geek. I know about I know about I can put the elite players in pretty good context, and I'll go out of my way to watch somebody if I need to. I'll watch a game. I'll watch video. Sometimes I'm a little bit too geeky about that stuff for my own good, but It's a fun challenge, and if I didn't think I could do it well, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
If I thought I was, throwing slop on the wall and choosing, I wouldn't do it. And that's why I talk to people,
Yep.
and I've got a good group of of cohorts, and it's interesting because three of them who I started talking to when they were in college, when they were college baseball players, are now working or formerly worked in MLB. So
pretty good indicator.
So I'm I'm not flying blind here. I promise.
And I don't want it to sound like I was.
No.
That gap. I just think that gap is atypical to where, it adds another layer to it, which not good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just an interesting thing to think about.
I am in a unique position as a voter,
Yep.
But would people look at me differently, if I had become a, BBWA voter during my first, during when I covered baseball, back before you were born?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'd be going on 40 years as a voter. Then people would be saying, "Oh my gosh, he's old school. He's this, he's that." I'll put my vote against anybody's and feel good about it. And that's it's go back to what we were talking about earlier. It's an honor and it's fun.
Well, I'm delighted that you took time out of your evening, little late night Locked On Twins, at least late for someone like me. I don't know if you're a night owl.
Dude, I'm at the keyboard at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning on the Star Tribune website. So yeah, I'm up. For you, I stay up past my bedtime, brother.
Well, I appreciate it immensely. Hopefully we can get touch base soon and who knows, catch a game or something. But
love to do that.
Maybe the Twins should sign some players first. Nevertheless, thank you so much. You can follow Howard on Twitter, @FansView. If not many real people left on Twitter, I don't think, but
No.
Nevertheless, he's Howard.
You can follow me on Threads at Howard Sinker MN.
Perfect. Threads. I'm on the Blue Sky myself. We'll see what happens, but for now, also on the Twitter machine. And I tell people they can unfollow me at Brandon_Warren. So for Howard Sinker, this is Brandon Warren signing off, saying thank you for hanging out with us on Locked On Twins, and we'll see you tomorrow night.